Uh, Good morning, everyone. My name is Essa Mohamedali. I wear a lot of different hats. So currently, my major title areas, I'm the director at the Tanzania AI Lab and Community and an innovation associate at the World Food Program. Starting off with some disclaimers because, the moment everyone gets involved with like the UN, they have to put those disclaimers. My opinions are purely my own and do not represent my organization's opinions. Um, Everything that I've done for the purpose of this presentation is purely for educational purposes. If you use these tools in some of the ways that I'll be talking about, please be very diligent about it, especially because we'll be talking a bit more about grant and proposal writing. And we understand that can be a very sensitive area, especially because we are either including sensitive information that could be intellectual property for an organization, or alternatively, because we are applying for large amounts of support and funding, and we want to make sure we are submitting accurate, relevant, and specific information. So those are some disclaimers before we get started. So, okay, anyways, I made these slides very quickly. So in grant and proposal writing, a lot of the areas that I would have wanted to cover about, thankfully, have already been talked about. And we share very similar overlaps with the aspects of the journalism conversation, where when getting started with grants or proposals, there's usually that cold start problem. Staring at that blank screen, we want to get started. But thankfully, at least with a lot of grants, we get an RFP. So we get that initial document that describes exactly what they're looking for, how much funding, sometimes what their judging criteria is, and a lot of that. And with a tool like GPT now, that makes it a lot easier to synthesize the information we have and start doing what we call matching, or rather what I like to call massaging a concept in. So what I like to do is give it a prompt, something like, you're a grants expert now. I'm going to give you the application and I will give you the context of that application. And then I'm going to give you maybe a concept that I have that I'd like to apply for this particular grant with. And in this case, I'm using the example of a grant that WFP actually just launched, the Global Innovation Grant. And I'll send the Global Innovation Challenge. I'll send the link for anyone that's interested to apply for that. So we give it the context. We tell it, this is what's happening. This is what we are interested in. Contextualize everything to this conversation. And then now that I've provided it the context, I give it the actual application form. I'm like, I want it to do as much work for me as possible. So I give it the actual application form and let it fill out all that information for me. Did I include the responses? I was more excited about what I'm going to talk about later. So I give it these two pieces of information and it gives me a more or less ready-made application that goes into some of the specific questions they ask, everything based on what they really wanted in the application form. So that's been a very interesting use case that we've been using in grant applications. But from what we've seen so far is that its major strength area is curating all the information. When I have most of the contents that I want to apply ready to go, and I just need to learn or to be able to customize it to fit into that application a bit better or contextualize it more to the domain they're looking for, is where it's a lot better. And then being able to massage the content there, it gives you a response. So some of the responses that we received, for example, when I was playing with it, is I'm applying with an idea. And one of the questions in the application form is, what's the traction you have? And it tells me that, so the answer it gives me to fill in is that we don't have any traction yet, but I have a good feeling about it. So I can't really put that in a proposal, at least not when I'm applying for like $100K, $200,000 kind of proposal. So I'm like, okay, I can't really use that. So let's get a bit more specific into the type of languaging used, and let's be very specific on the context and type that we are focusing on. So when it comes to those types of information, if we are able to provide, it becomes very useful and a lot more flexible. But generally speaking, as we've seen, it's very generic. If you are relying on it for context and for subject matter knowledge, then the information it'll give back to you is going to be very generic. You stand a better chance of doing your own research first around the topic areas, summarizing some of the key information and providing that to it along with all of your other requests and such. Then it focuses on that type of context or domain, and the information it gives you back is a lot more relevant, interesting. And the second thing is you may have seen proposals that are very long proposals, where by the end of it, you're coming out with a document that is quite something. And for context like that, it doesn't keep hold of the memory for long enough, especially when you're like, okay, first I want you to focus on this subject. Here's the application form. Here is my concept. Here is some extra research that's come in. Take all of this together. Before, it was a little bit easier when the browser plugin was still enabled, but they've since disabled the browser plugin, so it can't search the internet on its own anymore, which is a little bit inconvenient. But this is where I transitioned very quickly into a fun little experiment that I've been doing. And for those of you who know, Code Interpreter has come out. And since today's session is with Zindi, I decided to have some fun. And my question basically coming into this was, I don't code at all. Can I participate in a Zindi hackathon without writing a line of code and still end up somewhere on the leaderboard? So that's what I tried to do. So this is one of the challenges that's up on Zindi right now. I copied and pasted the entire description and everything. So if you read into this enough, you'll be able to see what challenge it is. So copy and pasted the whole context. And then I uploaded the data set. So I took the training data set, I uploaded it directly, I gave it the challenge context and told it, okay, this is what we have to do. Let's go. So first, it started doing all the data analysis on its own. It went in, it analyzed what type of data is here, what's going on, what do I have to look at. It's identified missing values, what data types are there, and did its own thing. I'm like, look, I'm not a technical person. I'm going to trust it entirely. Let's see what it does. So it did the analysis, it did visualization, and it brought forth some analysis around the status of the people, geography, things like that. And it told us that the next steps are going to be, let's do some data cleaning, let's do some feature engineering, let's build the model out of it. And from there, it actually started to do the data cleaning internally. It made some mistakes. It started to adjust them and continue to do all the data augmentation that it needed to do. I'm just like, proceed, 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 just to keep it continuing. And so from there, it ended up developing the model internally. It hasn't even, I haven't needed to open my Jupyter notebook or anything yet to put the code into, nothing. This is still happening all internally. It starts with a logistic regression model. It gives me the information. It's like, here's the accuracy. Here's the F1 scores. Gives us all of that. I'm like, okay, great. Let's try something else. It goes for a random forest model, and it still continues computing all of this internally. I still haven't opened my Colab. I still haven't tried to copy any of the code yet. I only realized this later on that, okay, now we're reaching certain limits where I need to start copying some of this code into my own areas. And at the end, I'm like, okay, here's a sample of how we're supposed to submit. Can you give me the predictions in this format? I didn't even do that on my own. Gave it that. It had made two models by this point that we wanted to focus on, and these were XGBoost models. One that used all the features that were available, another that only used the top 10 features that were available. And I took these and I uploaded them to Zindi. It gave me the CSVs to download directly. I didn't even open the CSVs. I downloaded them and uploaded them straight into Zindi. And here we are. So with about like a couple of minutes of sitting staring at my screen, telling it to proceed and uploading a few data sets, I got placed on a Zindi hackathon that I didn't write a single line of code for or do anything for. I have the CSVs. I can copy the codes into the Jupyter notebooks, and I have my entire code line and visualizations and everything. But of course, there are limits to this. I did want to experiment more and see how far into the leaderboard I could get, but unfortunately, I did not get the time for that. Um, so some interesting limitations that or learnings that we found was basic computations. It can do it internally within the model itself. The logistic regressions, all of that. And just in case, I did copy the code base to validate the models and such, just to make sure it's not making up numbers and that kind of thing. And it seemed like it was doing some of the computations internally to generate the baseline models. But the moment we started going to more complex models that actually required some training, it was like, no, OpenAI isn't going to let us use that amount of compute. Over time, as the conversation gets a lot longer because it's producing a lot of output, it loses context. It will forget what it's talked about above. It will lose track of the data sets, and we have to upload it or keep on reminding it and such. And then, of course, the subject matter expertise side of things. Having a subject matter expert in any problem area is, of course, very valuable. So yeah, that was a fun little experiment that I worked on because why not? Thank you.